Okay, so I'm going to turn on a timer. Let's just, the items are timed. So time management is one of the major skills that will increase scores. If you know how to manage your time, how to use the time so that each minute counts. So there's something like, I don't know, there's 9 or 10 questions, and there's the reading. So you got to do all of that in 20 minutes. So
Yeah.
What do you think, either one of you? How many minutes would you allot to the reading? So you've got 20 minutes, and you've got to read the paragraph, and you have to answer 10 questions or so. So
Right.
I would suggest that you would say to yourself, okay, I have to read and take notes in 10 minutes. So then I have a minute each for the questions. And, you know, in each reading section, this is what you've got to work with. You have 20 minutes to complete the reading and answering about 10 questions. So one of the skills that you have to be aware of is time management. In other words, you can't take too long reading, or you won't have time to answer the questions, and then you won't get a good score. So it's about reading, it's about vocabulary, and it's about figuring out the answers to the questions. So when you read, it's a good idea to take brief notes. You don't have to make sentences. Just kind of get an idea of what the important idea is in each paragraph. So I'm going to use my phone and set a timer. No, I guess a stopwatch that will tell us how long we're taking. Okay? So
Okay.
The city of Teotihuacan, which lay about 50 kilometers northeast of modern-day Mexico City, began its growth by 200 to 100 BC. At its height, between about AD 150 and 700, it probably had a population of more than 125,000 people and covered at least 20 square kilometers. It had over 2,000 apartment complexes, a great market, a large number of industrial workshops, and an administrative center, a number of massive religious edifices, and a regular grid pattern of streets and buildings. Clearly, much planning and central control were involved in the expansion and ordering of this great metropolis. Moreover, the city had economic and perhaps religious contacts with most parts of Mesoamerica, which means modern Central America and Mexico. So what's the main idea here about this city?
I think it introduces. I think this paragraph introduces the city overall.
Right. And so it was a reasonably big city, right? 125,000 people, 20 square kilometers. So basically, it was a pretty big city with a lot of planning and central control and contacts with most parts of Central America, including Mexico. Okay, who'd like to read the next paragraph?
I would like to.
Go ahead.
Okay. How did this tremendous development take place, and why did it happen in the Teotihuacan Valley? Among the main factors are Teotihuacan's geographic location on a natural trade route to the south and east of the Valley of Mexico, the Obsidian resources in the Teotihuacan Valley itself, and the valley's potential for extensive irrigation. The exact role of the other factors is much more difficult to pinpoint. For instance, Teotihuacan's religious significance as a shrine, the historical
Situation.
situation in and around toward the end of the first millennium BC. Yeah. The ingenuity and foresightedness of the Teotihuacans elite. Finally, the impact of the natural disasters such as the volcanic eruptions of the late first millennium BC.
Okay, so to sum up that, what are the major resources that drew people to this place? It's on a big river, right? So it was a place that was easy for people to walk through or to travel through. Secondly, there is a natural resource, the mineral obsidian. So that was a source of wealth. And the third thing is that since the river was fairly big, it could irrigate a lot of farmland. So it was a good place to grow stuff. Those are the three major resources. Okay, who'd like to read paragraph 3?
Me.
Go ahead.
This last factor is at least circumstantially implicated in Teotihuacan's rise.
Yeah, I can't tell you how to pronounce that.
Yes, difficult pronounce. Prior to 200 BC, a number of relatively small centers coexisted in and near the Valley of Mexico. Around this time, the largest of these centers, Cusco, was seriously affected by a volcanic eruption, with much of its agricultural land covered by lava, with Cusco eliminated as a potential rival. Any one of a number of relatively modest towns might have emerged as a leading economic and political power in central Mexico. The archaeological evidence clearly indicates, though, that Teotihuacan was a center that did arise as a predominant force in the area by the 1st century AD.
Okay, good. So what's the nugget of this paragraph? What did this paragraph do for our knowledge about this valley? What did we learn?
Reason why the Teotihuacan combined in a predominant area. I don't know.
Say that again.
This paragraph tells us how the Teotihuacan, just like a reason why Teotihuacan combated the predominant force.
Right. And what was the big influence that made Teotihuacan the city in the valley that became the big city? What knocked out the other cities? The sentence around this time, the largest of these centers was seriously affected by a volcanic eruption, with much of its agricultural land covered by lava. So other places, especially this other big contender, when its ability to grow food was destroyed by the volcanic eruption, it gave a big boost to Teotihuacan. So, okay, so for paragraph 4, who's going to read 4?
Correct.
Okay, Jesus, go ahead.
Okay. It seems likely that Teotihuacan's natural resources, along with the city's ability to recognize their potential, gave the city a competitive edge over its neighbors. The valley, like many other places in Mexican and Guatemalan highlands, was rich in obsidian. The hard volcanic stone was a resource that had been in great demand for many years, at least since the rise of the Olmecs, a people who flourished between 1000 or 1200 and
1200, yeah.
or 400 BC, and apparently had a secure market. Moreover, recent research on obsidian tools from Olmec sites has shown that some of the obsidian has shown that some of the obsidian obtained by the Olmecs originated near Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan obsidian must have been recognized as a valuable commodity for many centuries before the great city arose.
Okay. So the obsidian was really important. They used it to make tools from, and that was an important thing to have. Okay, paragraph 5. Long distance trade in obsidian probably gave the elite residents of Teotihuacan access to a wide variety of exotic goods, as well as a relatively prosperous life. Such success may have attracted immigrants to Teotihuacan. In addition, Teotihuacan's elite may have consciously attempted to attract new inhabitants. It's also probable that as early as 200 BC, Teotihuacan may have achieved some religious significance, and its shrine or shrines may have served as an additional population magnet. Finally, the growing population was probably fed by increasing the number and size of irrigated fields. It became a prosperous place because of the trade value of the obsidian, which meant that they had a lot of resources and some money, and people living there was easy and prosperous. It was a good place to live. And it also was a center for pilgrimage, for visiting religious shrines. Okay. And paragraph 6. Who would like to read it?
Ma'am, I want to read.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
The picture of Teotihuacan that emerges is a classic picture of positive feedback among obsidian mining and working trade, population growth, irrigation, and religious tourism. The thriving obsidian operation, for example, would necessitate more miners, additional manufacturers of Obsidian tools, and additional traders to carry the goods to a new markets. All this led to increased wealth, which in turn would attract more immigrants to Teotihuacan. The growing power of the elite who control the economy would give them the means to physically coerce people to move to Teotihuacan and serve as additions to the labor force. More irrigation works would have to be built to feed the growing population, and this resulted in more power and wealth for the elite. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so basically this sums up everything that contributed to Teotihuacan being a thriving, growing center for population and employment and agriculture. And there's a footnote here about obsidian, that it's a type of volcanic glass-like rock used for manufacturing tools and ceremonial objects. And I'm sure that if you plugged in obsidian into Google, you'd probably get a picture of it. I think it's black, but I'm not sure. So we used 12 and a half minutes reading and summarizing. So let's go with the questions. In paragraph 1, each of the following is mentioned as a feature of the city of Teotihuacan between its dates of thriving, except regularly arranged streets. Was that in paragraph 1?
No.
Nope, I don't think so. Several administrative centers spread across the city. Was that mentioned?
Yes.
Yes, good. Many manufacturing workshops. Was that there?
No.
Let's see.
Yeah, it is.
A large number of industrial workshops, it says. Industrial manufacturing, yeah, they match. And apartment complexes. Did it mention apartment complexes?
No, I don't
Yes,
think so.
Yes, it did.
No.
There
It was
were
the first
hundreds
one.
of them. There were 2,000 apartment complexes. So which one is the correct answer here? A, B, C, or D?
A, I think then.
I think the B. B.
Yep, I think you're probably right. It was one administrative center. So B is the correct answer. Okay, in paragraph 2, the word ingenuity in paragraph 2 is closest in meaning to ambition, sincerity, faith, or cleverness. Now you can go back and look at ingenuity is highlighted. So the ingenuity.
I think it's the cleverness.
It's cleverness, yes, you're correct. Which of the following is not mentioned in paragraph 2 as a main factor in the development of Teotihuacan? The presence of obsidian in the Teotihuacan Valley, the potential for extensive irrigation of the valley lands, a long period of volcanic inactivity, and its location on a natural trade route. So those are all mentioned, but which wasn't mentioned in paragraph 2? Natural trade route is mentioned. Obsidian is mentioned.
I think it is C, ma'am.
Irrigation is mentioned. So what isn't mentioned? in that paragraph.
Then it's C,
What?
a long period of volcanic.
C, yes, the long period of volcanic inactivity. It's mentioned in other places, but not in paragraph C. Question 4, what can be inferred from paragraph 3 about Cusco prior to 200 BC? Inferred is a really important word there. Do you know what it means?
Sorry?
What does the word inferred mean here? Because that's what they're asking you, so you got to know what it means. It's an important
think
word
it
to know for these tests.
Maybe D.
Means what?
D.
Okay. Okay, so I'm not so sure. Paragraph 3, Cusco.
Infinite.
What can we know about Cusco, even though they didn't say it? The largest of the other centers in and near the Valley of Mexico, Cusco, was seriously affected by a volcanic eruption, and much of its agricultural land was covered by lava. So what we can deduce from prior to 200 BC, when was the, so 200 BC was the eruption. It was a fairly small city. No, I think it was probably one of the larger cities, right? They wouldn't have mentioned it otherwise. It was located outside the Valley of Mexico. Did they say that? They said the opposite, I think. A number of relatively small centers. So yes, it was relatively small, coexisted in and near the Valley of Mexico. So we can't infer that it was outside the Valley of Mexico because they said it was inside. It emerged rapidly as an economical and political center. Nothing was said about that. And in fact, what the paragraph said was that it was not allowed to emerge because of the volcanic eruption. And we can infer that its economy relied heavily on agriculture because once its land was covered by lava, it couldn't grow anymore. So the correct answer here is C. It did not. It was stopped as an economical and political center. Okay, question 5. Which of the following allowed Teotihuacan to have a competitive edge over its neighbors? A well-exploited and readily available commodity, that would be the obsidian. The presence of a highly stable elite class. Knowledge derived directly from the Olmecs about the art of tool making, or scarce natural resources in nearby areas, such as those located in what are now the Guatemalan and Mexican highlands. Which one of those?
I think it's B, the presence of a highly stable elite class.
No, no.
Yeah, I agree. What do you say, Abu?
Knowledge derived directly from the Olmecs about the art of tool making.
Okay, point to that.
Sorry?
Where does it say that?
Letter C.
Yeah, I know, but where does it say that in the paragraph? I think we're looking at paragraph 4.
Paragraph 4. Yes, thanks.
A competitive edge over its neighbors is highlighted. So there were 2 things there that it mentions. And let's look at that question. Well, the one that they mentioned is the one that's on my screen is highlighted. Number A. The commodity. Do you know what that means? A commodity? It means a resource.
Yeah.
So a well-exploited and readily available resource, the obsidian, is what the paragraph talked about. And the other thing they mention is the city elite's ability to recognize their potential, which is not what is talked about in that question. It says the presence of a highly stable elite class. Talks about the elite's stability, but not their creativity. So that's not a correct answer. The answer is A.
Okay.
Okay, according to paragraph 4, what has recent research on obsidian tools found at the Olmec sites shown? A, obsidian's value was understood only when Teotihuacan became an important city. I think that only leaves that out. The residents of Teotihuacan were sophisticated toolmakers, possibly. The residents of Teotihuacan traded obsidian with the Olmecs as early as 400 BC. And D, some of the obsidian used by the Olmecs came from the area around Teotihuacan. So we're looking at paragraph 4. Here it is. Recent research on obsidian tools found at Olmec sites has shown that some of the obsidian obtained by the Olmecs originated near Teotihuacan, and that the obsidian must have been recognized as a valuable commodity long before the great city came up. So the answer there in this question 6 can't be A because there's a contradictory sentence. Doesn't really talk about B, doesn't really talk about C, but it does talk about D. So the answer is D. Okay, 7. Select the 2 answer choices that are mentioned in paragraph 5 as being features of Teotihuacan that may have attracted immigrants to the city. To receive credit, you must select 2. Okay, would you believe we would not actually get to that question at the rate we're going? We are way slow. It's 27 minutes gone by and we haven't gotten to question 10. We've only gotten to 7. So let's think about what we've done. And what suggestions would you have for being able to speed up the process so that you'd get to all 10 questions in 20 minutes, not 27 minutes? Anybody?
to have an overall.
To what?
I mean, I had to have a skimming over all the. I think it's good to have a skimming of the overall paragraphs first, and then come to the question. Then we can
Yeah.
go back to a very detailed and deep reading of the paragraphs. It takes a lot of time.
That's true. So I wonder what would happen if you just went to the questions. Since the paragraphs are identified, then you can go read the paragraph. That would give you another whole 10 minutes. What do you think?
Yes, I think also that it can work if you go first to the question, and after that you will go to the paragraph. You may have time.
I think that might be an interesting thing to try.
Yes, I think so. That too. You can also try to, if you have a long test, what you need to do is to try to find main ideas of each paragraph. So if you do that, you may
Right.
earn more times. Yes.
We did that, but what I noticed was when we started answering the questions, we still had to go back and look at the paragraphs, which meant that reading the paragraphs and taking notes on their main ideas didn't really help us a whole lot. Because we still had to go back and reread the paragraphs. And it's a basic principle that anything that you have to do twice, that's not good in this kind of situation. So as you've practiced this week on reading, I'll post another test item or you can find one in the book. There are a whole bunch of practice sets. Starting for the reading section, they give you one paragraph and one idea, one question first before they do the whole section. So this was practice set 5, or actually it was one online. It was the second one that I found online. But obviously we need to practice the time management aspect of this so that we know when we get into the test, what is the best way to proceed? And I have to say, after doing that and realizing, okay, so that makes us really way behind in the timing aspect, and that's going to really crush our score. It would be better, most likely, to forego reading the paragraph and go to the questions and just read the paragraph where that's indicated in the question and find the answer. Because as we went through the questions, we got better at figuring out where did they actually talk about the subject in the question. And it was pretty clear in the paragraph when they talked about the topic that was asked in the question. The questions actually asked about things that were said clearly in the paragraph. So I think it might be an interesting idea. And I'll ask you to practice with the one that we post and try it by not reading the whole section first, but going right to the questions and seeing if you can practice and get better at finding the answers. If you notice, the some of the words in the questions were highlighted in the paragraphs. That was helpful. And like I said, the actual question was addressed specifically in the paragraphs. So you need to find the sentence that says something about what they're asking the question about. They're not being mysterious about where they're getting the questions. So the other thing that strikes me as we read the paragraphs was that any paragraph that we read, and I'll post one of these too for work this week, any paragraph that we read has words that we're not sure what they mean, right? So any reading that you do can also be a practice for adding to vocabulary. And that's another practice with reading. Obviously, if you're doing a test item, you don't want to practice looking up words. But that is another way of improving the words, our vocabulary, our understanding. And I discovered something just now before class that was interesting. And that was, I looked up the name of the writer of a book. I searched the name and came up with articles that the person that I was searching had written. So that is a way of, taking authors that you might be interested in reading and finding shorter passages of what they wrote to practice reading with. So for instance, I looked up Annie Murphy Paul, who's the writer of the book that we'll talk about on Friday, Extending the Extended Mind. But I found several interesting articles that she'd written. So even if you don't have the book, you can practice reading expository text by different authors. And
Yes.
you've discovered that too, Abu?
Yes, I have started reading the book that you just said, Extended Mind. Sorry.
Good. Okay. I mean, it's stuff she's written about other things, but interesting material and good reading practice. So we've used up our time, and possibly we've learned something useful about doing, acing the reading section. So I'll continue with another reading section next week, and we'll also give you a reading section to practice with in between times, because speeding up our ability to do the item and get to all the questions obviously will pay off. So it's a good thing to practice. Okay?